In the depths of human consciousness, where shadows dance with light and souls whisper their deepest truths, there exists a sacred wound that bleeds in silence. It is carried by those whose hearts beat in rhythm with the universe's pain, whose spirits have been chosen to bear witness to humanity's hidden darkness. Carl Jung, that brave explorer of the psyche's deepest caverns, once whispered of a transformation so profound, so terrifying in its beauty, that he dared not speak its full truth during his lifetime. He witnessed souls who appeared broken, gentle spirits crushed beneath the weight of others' projected darkness, until the moment their inner fire could no longer be contained within the vessel of their suffering. What emerges when a wounded healer finally stops healing everyone but themselves? What ancient power awakens when the gentlest among us remember they were never meant to be sacrificial offerings on the altar of others' dysfunction? In the sacred texts of psychology, there exists no phenomenon more mysterious than what Jung called the empath's resurrection. That moment when infinite compassion meets infinite wisdom, when the soul's accumulated pain transforms into supernatural clarity, when the very sensitivity that made them targets becomes a sword that cuts through every illusion. Today, we descend into the mystery of the empath's shadow, that sacred darkness where the soul keeps its sharpest truths, waiting for the moment of reckoning. This is not a story of victimhood overcome, but of divinity remembered. This is the secret history of those who carry light in a world that feeds on shadow. Onward, thinkers. My name is Mr. Halvig, and you're watching The Rational Wise. In the hidden chambers of Jung's clinic in Zurich, behind doors that sealed away society's deepest secrets, arrived the walking wounded, empaths whose light had been systematically harvested by emotional vampires masquerading as loved ones. They came bearing invisible stigmata, souls punctured by 1,000 small betrayals, hearts that had been emptied drop by precious drop until only the echo of their former compassion remained. But Jung saw what others could not. Beneath their trembling exterior, behind eyes that held oceans of unshed tears, lay something that would change everything he believed about human nature. These were not broken birds with clipped wings. They were dormant phoenixes, gathering strength in the ashes of their own destruction, preparing for a resurrection that would shake the foundations of psychological understanding. The soul, Jung wrote in his private journals, keeps perfect record of every wound inflicted upon it, not for revenge, but for the moment of its own resurrection. In the empath's heart lies a library of human darkness so complete that when they finally learn to read it, they become more dangerous to deception than truth itself. These empaths possessed what Jung came to understand as the divine gift of perfect emotional memory, a supernatural ability to record not just what people said, but the intention behind their words, the fear beneath their anger, the manipulation disguised as love. Every cruelty was cataloged with forensic precision in the soul's vast archive. Every manipulation was stored in the heart's endless library of human darkness. Every betrayal became another page in the sacred text of their eventual awakening. They were unconscious chroniclers of the human shadow, living repositories of psychological truth that society desperately wanted to remain buried. Their sensitivity wasn't the weakness everyone claimed it to be. It was a supernatural ability to read the invisible scripts that govern human behavior, to see through the mask that others wore as naturally as breathing, to know the difference between love and its countless clever imitations. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more than you think. Now let's continue. For years, decades sometimes, these souls absorbed the projected darkness of everyone around them, like spiritual sponges soaking up the ocean's depths. They became what Jung termed shadow carriers, individuals who unknowingly held the disowned parts of their families, their communities, their entire social systems. Parents dumped their unprocessed trauma into these empathic children like emotional landfills. Partners projected their deepest insecurities onto these understanding souls like dark mirrors. Friends use them as psychic waste dumps for their undigested pain. And the empaths, in their infinite, naive compassion, accepted it all. They told themselves stories that became their prison. I'm helping them heal. They need me. Love means sacrifice. Their pain is more important than mine. But while their conscious minds crafted these beautiful delusions, their souls were keeping different records. In the depths of their unconscious, a different truth was being written in letters of fire, a accounting so precise it would make angels weep and demons flee. Jung discovered that these empaths weren't just feeling, they were learning. Every emotional transaction was being studied, analyzed, filed away in the soul's vast intelligence network, like a cosmic database of human nature. They were becoming inadvertent masters of human psychology, experts in the subtle arts of manipulation and emotional warfare, warriors who didn't know they were warriors, scholars of darkness who believed themselves to be servants of light. The tragedy wasn't that they were being used as emotional batteries for others' dysfunction. The tragedy was that they had been convinced their extraordinary gifts were pathological weaknesses. Every time their intuition screamed danger, they were told they were too sensitive. Every time they saw through someone's carefully constructed facade, they were accused of being judgmental or paranoid. Every time their soul cried out for protection and boundaries, they were taught to apologize for their very existence. Jung observed something that chilled him to his core. These empaths developed what he called empathic amnesia, the ability to forget their own needs so completely that they began to believe they didn't have any. They learned to silence their inner voice so effectively that they forgot it had ever spoken. They became masters of self-abandonment, artists of self-betrayal, unconsciously training themselves to be the perfect victims for conscious predators. But the soul, Jung realized, never forgets. While the conscious mind crafted elaborate justifications for their suffering, the unconscious was building something that would eventually destroy every illusion they had been taught to cherish. Deep in the shadow realms of their psyche, their true power was gathering like storm clouds on the horizon of their awareness. Then comes the moment that Jung called the great betrayal, not just any disappointment or letdown, but the soul-shattering recognition that the person they trusted most, loved deepest, protected fiercest, had been feeding on their light while systematically poisoning their reality. The moment when their perfect emotional memory finally spoke louder than their desperate need to believe in love. The instant when all their accumulated wisdom crashed into their accumulated denial, like two cosmic forces colliding in the depths of space. This is when the shadow integration begins, not as psychological theory or therapeutic process, but as spiritual apocalypse, as the death and rebirth of everything they thought they knew about themselves. Jung wrote in his secret journals, when the empath's shadow finally merges with their light, when their accumulated darkness dances with their infinite compassion, heaven and hell make love in the same soul. And from this sacred union is born something that terrifies both saints and sinners. A being who can love without losing themselves, who can see without being deceived, who can feel everything while choosing everything. The awakening doesn't come as nervous breakdown or emotional collapse. It comes as supernatural clarity, as if a veil that had been covering their inner sight for decades suddenly dissolves like morning mist. These souls don't explode into rage or collapse into despair. Instead, they become still in a way that makes the earth itself hold its breath. They have touched something ancient and immutable within themselves. The part of their being that has been watching, waiting, learning, preparing for this exact moment of recognition. For the first time in their lives, they speak not from their wounded heart, but from their awakened soul. And when they speak, the truth that emerges is so precise, so devastatingly accurate, so surgically exact, that it strips away every illusion their abusers have ever hidden behind, like a divine wind clearing away smoke and mirrors. This is not revenge, it is revelation. This is not cruelty, It is clarity given voice and form. This is not destruction, it is creation of new reality through the speaking of suppressed truth. They begin to use their supernatural ability to read human nature, not to excuse destructive behavior or enable dysfunction, but to expose it with the surgical precision of divine justice operating through human consciousness. The shadow they had carried for others, their unprocessed rage, their denied selfishness, their suppressed strength, finally returns to its rightful owners like cosmic boomerangs completing their destined arc. The projections they had absorbed for decades suddenly reflect back like mirrors positioned to catch the sun's full power. Those who had fed on their empathy like emotional parasites discover that their source of nourishment has transformed into something they can no longer digest. Truth so pure it burns their carefully constructed lies to ash. Jung observed something that shook him to his core and kept him awake for months afterward. These awakened empaths retained all their capacity for love and compassion, but they had learned to love themselves with the same fierce intensity, the same protective dedication, the same infinite forgiveness they had once reserved exclusively for others. They had become what he called conscious lovers, beings who could feel everything and choose everything with complete sovereignty over their own hearts, their own energy, their own sacred life force. The most terrifying discovery was that these transformed empaths possessed the power to destroy anyone who had ever hurt them. Their perfect emotional memory had recorded every weakness, every insecurity, every secret shame of their abusers. They knew exactly which words would shatter their enemies' carefully maintained self-images, which truths would expose their deepest hypocrisies, which revelations would destroy their social masks forever. But here is where Jung witnessed something that convinced him he was observing the birth of a new form of human consciousness. These empaths chose not to use their devastating knowledge as weapons of destruction. Instead, they wielded their power like spiritual surgeons, cutting away toxic connections with the precision of divine healers, removing themselves from dysfunctional systems without unnecessary cruelty, choosing liberation over revenge. The transformation Jung witnessed was not temporary healing or psychological improvement. It was permanent evolution, a fundamental shift in consciousness that could never be reversed or undone. These souls had touched something so fundamental about their own divine nature that they could never again be unconscious about where they invested their sacred energy, their precious attention, their irreplaceable life force. They developed what Jung termed selective empathy, the divine ability to feel deeply while choosing wisely, to maintain an open heart while protecting it fiercely, to love without losing themselves in the process. They became spiritual warriors disguised as gentle souls, beings who could love with infinite tenderness those who deserved their care, while remaining utterly immune to the manipulations and projections of those who didn't. The awakened empath, Jung wrote in his final notes on these miraculous cases, becomes a force of nature, neither cruel nor kind, but simply true. They reflect back to the world exactly what it offers them, and in doing so, they become agents of collective awakening, mirrors that show humanity both its highest potential and its deepest shadows. These transformed beings created ripples of change that extended far beyond their personal sphere, like stones thrown into the still pond of collective consciousness. Their mere presence began to force evolution in everyone around them. Toxic individuals found themselves unable to operate their usual psychological games. The empath's integrated awareness acted like spiritual kryptonite to their manipulative powers. Authentic souls felt safer and more seen than they had ever felt before, drawn to these awakened empaths like plants turning toward the sun. Family systems that had relied on the empath's dysfunction, that had used their sensitivity as a dumping ground for collective shadow, were compelled to either heal or dissolve. The empath's transformation forced everyone in their orbit to choose between evolution and revelation, to grow into more authentic versions of themselves or have their true nature exposed by the empath's unwavering commitment to truth. The empaths had become what every unconscious person fears most, and every conscious person hopes to find. Someone who can see through all illusions, but no longer needs anything from those who live behind masks. Someone who offers love freely, but never at the expense of their own soul's integrity. But here is the sacred secret Jung discovered through decades of observation. These awakened empaths chose compassion over vengeance every time. They possessed the nuclear power to destroy those who had hurt them, the knowledge to expose every secret, the insight to shatter every carefully maintained lie. But instead, they chose to remove themselves from toxic systems and build new realities based on authentic connection, genuine reciprocity, and conscious love. They had solved the greatest mystery of human existence: how to keep an open heart in a world that often rewards emotional predation, how to remain sensitive in a culture that sees gentleness as weakness, how to love deeply without becoming a victim of that love. Their solution wasn't to close their hearts or numb their sensitivity or build impenetrable walls around their souls. It was to develop conscious mastery over their extraordinary gifts, to become spiritual ninjas who could love and protect simultaneously. Jung's research revealed that these transformed empaths didn't just heal, they became healers in the truest sense. Not by fixing others, but by embodying a level of consciousness that made unconsciousness uncomfortable in their presence. They became living invitations for others to evolve, walking examples of what becomes possible when someone learns to honor their sensitivity as the sacred gift it has always been. If you recognize yourself in this ancient story of death and rebirth, know this truth that Jung spent his lifetime trying to communicate. Your sensitivity is not your curse. It is your calling, your mission, your contribution to the evolution of human consciousness. Your ability to feel deeply is not your weakness. It is your superpower waiting to be consciously wielded like a sword of truth in a world hungry for authenticity. The pain you have endured was not meaningless suffering or cosmic punishment. It was the sacred initiation that prepared your soul to become a force for conscious evolution, a bridge between worlds, a translator of the heart's deepest languages. Every betrayal was a lesson in discernment. Every manipulation was training in boundary setting. Every moment of being misunderstood was preparation for understanding yourself so completely that no one else's opinion could shake your foundation. The question whispered by your own shadow, echoing in the chambers of your awakening heart, is not whether you will transform. Evolution is inevitable for souls as aware as yours. The question is whether you will choose conscious integration or let life force the awakening through continued betrayal and pain. Whether you will become the author of your own resurrection or remain a character in someone else's story. Jung's deepest insight echoes through time like a bell calling souls to awakening. The empath who learns to trust their own perceptions completely becomes an unstoppable force for truth in a world desperate for authenticity, a lighthouse guiding other souls home to themselves. Your journey is not toward becoming less sensitive. It is toward becoming consciously sensitive, strategically compassionate, selectively generous with the gift of your attention. Not toward feeling less, but toward choosing more wisely what deserves your precious emotional energy. Not toward dimming your light to make others comfortable, but toward deciding who has earned the privilege of basking in its radiance. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more high-value content. The shadow you have carried for so long is ready to be integrated into your conscious awareness. The pain you have absorbed like a spiritual sponge is ready to be transformed into wisdom, strength, and unshakable self-trust. The love you have given so freely to others is ready to include the most important person in your entire story, yourself. This is your invitation to step into the fullness of your empathic power, to become the conscious healer you were always meant to be. to join the ranks of those awakened souls who are midwifing humanity's evolution, one conscious choice at a time. This is your call to remember that empaths are not the victims of this world. They are its secret healers, its bridge builders, its hope for a future where consciousness and compassion dance together in every human heart. Onward, thinkers!